Okay, let's talk about the role of a sensitive in an intelligent ecology or an intelligent culture. So first of all, we are part of the natural ecology. And the reason we have a biodiversity of personality and, in this case, sensitivity, is to preclude the phenomena of the Irish potato famine. The more monocrop you have of anything, the more blind you are to certain dimensions. And so an intelligent culture utilizes the unique strengths of its subcategories in a way that facilitates cultural well-being. And the role of a sensitive is to perceive the patterns that are in the environment. You can think of it as a very sensitive microphone. Everything is an energy system, and the most graceful ecologies or energy systems or systems of any kind have a fair amount of symmetry and balance. That's why we have wheels that facilitate forward momentum with less bumps than a square. So a sensitive is best used to perceive the dynamic in the system, and in doing so, observe the imbalances or asymmetries within that system. And when a sensitive is honored in that way, you can think of scholars who do detailed anthropology, or even a sicentist that carefully works through the full system of the body, or does a certain segment of research. We also have intuitives, psychics, etc. The purpose of a sensitive, optimally used, is to fully understand the energy system. And because reality is fractal in nature, one of the ways that a sensitive will do that is by observing it within themselves. A deep introvert, for example, will often understand the world around them in more clarity, more high definition than an extrovert who's in that outer reality, in part because all of the cultural phenomena that we experience and operate in interacts with us through mirror neurons, through different adaptive personalities. If one is truly aware of oneself, the self does not exist in isolation. It exists in the context of an environment. So deep, unbiased self-awareness leads to an awareness of the environment around. If there is hostility inside, there is some part of the self being violated in the environment that is causing regression and hostility for a portion inside. And this has always been how I get to know someone. When I was in polyamorous relationships for a year, it was very useful to understand the impact of the various, I had, I think, 7 lovers at one point. And I would be very different people with each person. And I was a phenomenal chef with one lover because she salivated over every dish that I created. And so I amplified that trait within me to deliver love in her love language. For someone else, I was relatively normal and a fun tennis player, etc. For someone else, I was an extraordinary exchanger of gifts because they were an exceptional exchanger of gifts. And so it was, the way that I get to know the person I'm with or the system I'm with is by understanding how it's affecting me. And the opportunity that this provides, is through understanding the dynamics within a sensitive. One can understand the environment that is inducing those dynamics, one. And also, a sensitive can be very observant and simply be aware of a variety of dynamics. Now, in a fear-based or a shame-based culture, and they are one and the same, a shame-based culture is a fear-based culture, because shame is the phenomena of exclusion and taboos, and also scapegoating. All of scapegoating, taboos, and exclusion are all phenomena of shame that attack the third hierarchy of human need, which is love and belonging. Abraham Maslow identified survival, security, love, and belonging. Now, in our system of reality, a chauvinistic, capitalistic system, there are a lot of people who are in survival. They may be surviving, but their mindset is, will I survive again next month? Or they may be in security. I think I'm going to survive, physically at least. And then we have a tremendous amount of people who are in shaky terrain as far as love and belonging, because in a highly shame-based cult, everyone has secrets that cross party lines, that violate one taboo or another. And in a shame-based system, if these secrets are exposed, they are violating taboos, and there's a protocol of exclusion. You won't be invited to the party. That's a form of exclusion. You're not going to get the deal. Another form of exclusion. You're going to be shamed in social circles, another source of exclusion. And so the problem that shame-based cultures create for the healthy role of the sensitive is that the sensitive's primary function is to bring awareness of the surrounding environment by speaking inner truth, because they are one and the same. A sensitive picks stuff up in their body, heart and mind, etc., more than the majority. It's not black or white or anything. Elaine Aron has done neurological studies to show that 10 to 20% of a number of mammalian groups, including human beings, have disproportionate responsiveness at a brain level. And so they're in the highly sensitive category. The trouble with a sensitive speaking their truth in a shame-based culture is that they reveal the truths of the culture inside. The fractal nature of reality is such that if one person fully speaks the truth, you can infer. Another way of referring this, there's also a holographic paradigm. Within a small hologram, a small section, if you break a hologram into 1,000 pieces, you can extrapolate what the entire hologram is by looking at the light patterns in a given individual. Now, this terrifies a shame-based cult, because in a shame-based cult, one person speaking the truth is going to reveal the secrets in the larger cult environment. And the The negative aspect, or the problem that comes, or the vulnerability of a sensitive, is that they can be overwhelmed more easily than the average person, which tends to make them more conflict averse. Because if you feel pain louder and faster than the average person, if you get into a conflict with a non-sensitive, your pain threshold is going to be reached before the pain threshold is reached in the non-sensitive person. And as a result, it's unrewarding to get into conflict, but for the sensitive faction to get into conflict with the non-sensitive faction. And so this is the vulnerability. So, in a healthy dynamic, the sensitive is honored for their specific skill set and is also protected. And we do this somewhat intuitively. We know to some extent who the sensitives are. And if we want them to be members, and we, in our culture, the female gender in general, biologically, is going to be more sensitive and more aware of the circle than the male gender. And if the female is attractive and young, which is part of attractiveness, we do a pretty good job of moderating stimulation so they won't withdraw, because there's plenty of males that are wanting to have sex with young, sensitive females. And that's the condition. If they withdraw from the group, then the males lose their opportunity for courting and all of that. And so we do a relatively decent job of adjusting for the sensitive young females. For that purpose, we don't do a good job of utilizing the intelligence and perceptive ability of those sensitives for the group. And we do a terrible job with men, the chauvinism that understands that sensitivity, particularly sensitivity for the circle and pattern, is a feminine trait, is somewhat shamed in men by chauvinistic women as well as chauvinistic men. And it's not viewed typically as a terribly high sex appeal, at least within the larger culture. But in both cases, this opportunity to learn what's going on by understanding the voice of the sensitive is largely ignored, to our detriment, in order to protect the secrets of a shame-based culture. The vulnerability, and what tends to happen in our culture, is sensitives get scapegoated with the energies that are taboo, that show up in their system, and that nobody wants to own. And these show up loudest in some of the research on psychics and remote viewing. The U.S. military has done some various studies in that arena to try and outmaneuver the Russians around secret bases and stuff. One of the things that emerged was that secret bases, or secrets of all kinds, light up in psychic terrain more than stuff that nobody has a charge around. Because for an energy sensitive, they're opening up the microphone, and the loudest signals that are hitting them are those signals that have a lot of emotional charge around them. And the things that have the highest emotional charge in our cultural system are fear-based secrets, because you have shame, fear, and trauma, the trauma of shame, the trauma of exclusion, all connected if anyone finds this out. So it gets very loud if you tune in, and the secrets pop up like the pink elephants in the room as the first things to deal with. And this is why in a shame-based culture, sensitives are incredibly unpopular. Who wants this? How are you figuring this stuff out? Why are you seeing this? Well, why are you talking about this? That's the one thing I don't want to talk about. And children, of course, do a great job of this until we bludgeon them into less sensitivity and more brainwashing to survive. A child will often look right at a thing and comment on this. And so they've got to be hurried away from diplomatic functions and stuff in case they ruin the illusion that is being perpetuated by the cult. And of course, psychedelics are an amplifier as well. And so one of the things that's going on in this dynamic is that in my capacity as a sensitive and as a designer, and someone that actually has an interest in well-being within, for example, some of the most important demographics within a school that's amplifying sexuality, is avoiding re-traumatization, avoiding shame, secrecy, and schizophrenia in all the various ways that tend to happen when there are shame-based abuse cycles, incest, you name it, in the community. And so, it's a little bit strange in this sense because Peter Sandhill pushed for this large psychedelic dose, and the first thing out of my mouth was how much he had hurt me 10 years earlier. But that's not what Peter wanted to hear. And so he pushed that one down. And then there was his blind spots, but he didn't want to hear that. And then there was the fact that this is ludicrous to have money involved in a lover relationship of this kind. And, absolutely not. So, and then it's of course ludicrous to talk about this not being a high issue when high is claiming as its mission responsibility for the whole world winning, its commitment. And so one of the things that's happened is that through the psychedelic experience, strengthening the already existing predisposition towards sensitivity and awareness and pattern design, etc., I've become, viscerally aware through the pain in my body and my psyche of deep asymmetries and anomalies and fuzzy math within the Human Awareness Institute community and power structure in a way that brings up the shame, fear-based defenses within the facilitator body, first within Peter Sandhill, and then within the facilitators, and then within the board, and then within the team and community to varying degrees. And there's been an effort to shame and push out the voice of the sensitive to protect the status quo of the power structure. And this is one of the reasons women are so important, particularly sensitive, feminine women are so important to play a strong role in the leadership and in the decision-making process of a healthy cult that wants to survive, that wants to be intelligent with the efficiency of transforming energy into human well-being. And that is not happening. Instead, there is a gathering of mass, that has resulted in a strong flooding of a lot of my systems that has turned data, facts, pattern analysis, and obvious truths into the enemy, and then identified that with the sensitive and wanting to scapegoat the sensitive. Let's push them out of the community so that we can go back to the way things were before we were threatened with information that we didn't want to digest. So, and it's very important to look at this play out. I mean, we can see it presidentially with Trump, where we feel when we're scared, we like a dominant chauvinist because it's comfortable for our culture. And there have been a lot of job losses. Andrew Yang is doing the best at addressing this core issue. Millions of jobs are moving towards automation, and some are moving overseas. And it's creating fear and insecurity. We're not responding to the data. And there's a lot of anxiety, and so we're grasping for familiar power structures, even if they are profoundly incompetent and lie, because they're familiar and people are looking for safety. Now, if that can't change within high, it's certainly not going to change nationally because it's a similar pattern. But in any intelligent system that loves itself, there is a place, just like there is for any other personality type, for the sensitive. And the sensitive, in part, has the empathy for the minorities, the minority voices. In this case, the most vulnerable demographic is the traumatically illiterate, childhood abused, often sexually abused faction of the community that does not have the tools to navigate effectively in this terrain. Now, it is inappropriate for a sensitive to do more than lay out the pattern. So that's the role that is being forced, meaning this is an unwelcome, the data that I'm bringing to the facilitators is being fought tooth and nail in just about every way other than a fist fight. We're going to sue you to shut down the website. We're not going to invite you to the meetings. We'll cut you off of the email groups. We're not going to respond to this. We're not going to engage. We're going to be silent about this. We won't bring in any experts that have more competency than we do to oversee the issue. We'll ignore these. We're just going to blockade this information. And so my role is in a healthy environment would be to share data more coherently and in more nuance than the typical person. And a healthy culture that is not afraid of success, competency, truth, and information coming to light values and treasures that. Shame-based culture will attack it. Now, I understand that the role of a district attorney or a bevy of lawyers, etc., is the next step if reality is being fought. If we have a power structure that believes, for whatever bizarre reason, that they or everyone is better off not knowing information, that's a corrupt power structure. You want a power structure that shares information. Now, we have a corrupt power structure in Washington where we go to all manner of extremes to bury what's going on because it's not healthy. And a good investigative journalist or someone like Edward Snowden will bring that to light, and they will, be attacked, and then grudgingly there will be some changes. And so what I've wanted to do in this series of websites, etc., is do my job of bringing attention to thousands of data points that reveal a pattern that is ready for an upgrade, that could easily be 5 to 10 times more intelligent. Meaning, you start with inviting feedback from the sensitives in the community rather than shutting them up. That's number one. But number two, I've read thousands of pages in order to piece together these, fractal patterns, etc., and put them in the hands of the power structure. The sensitives are not generally very good at being diplomatic, groups often overwhelm, etc. So this information is here. There is a public safety threat that needs to be addressed. And if necessary, a district attorney can restructure the power structure or shut high down, and that can be analyzed by myself and others to look at what comes back in its place, etc. But this is the healthy role of the sensitives in any group, and they hold a piece of survival of the species, of the group, of the community, which is why nature creates 10 to 20% sensitives. They have, if there are 10 to 20% sensitives and they are given a 10 to 20% voice in, that decision-making thing, everyone benefits. Everyone benefits. And so that's part of the meta conversation of what's going on between me and the facilitator power structure is, do we have a community that values the voice of the sensitive or shuts it down? And what does that make necessary if the data necessary for the community to thrive and reach its mission is willfully suppressed and denied in order to maintain a destructive status quo that is harming a percentage of people? The question is then, how do we have to adapt to an unhealthy environment to protect those most vulnerable? And I'm dealing with this in my city and county around our homeless, where we're spending $40,000 to $60,000 per person to maintain chronic homelessness and policing, graffiti removal, ER visits, and all that. It's cheaper to give them a home. But we don't like that. We don't like that data. And so we're pushing for higher police budgets and this and that, and we're dehumanizing our most vulnerable people. And so anyway, this is a context, and it's one learning opportunity, because the real power comes, if you want to see changes in Washington, etc., is you have to understand the same dynamic that's happening on a big scale at the family and community level, and local government level. And if you can figure it out there and make the appropriate changes, then you can take it to a higher level. You will never get a Washington that is sane while perpetuating the same dysfunctional patterns in local community.